I'm so tired of hearing about the male loneliness epidemic.
Then stop talking about it, because you never hear men talking about it unless they're pick-me boys pandering to misandrists, or guys like me who constantly have to debunk the concept.
Let's talk about the female loneliness epidemic, because we're experiencing one too.
Finally becoming self-aware, I see. Maybe it's time to just admit that people simply aren't dating anymore.
One where men treat you like you're some fantasy object, and the moment they realize you're an actual human being with thoughts, feelings, and emotions, they're gone.
What in the name of Joseph Goebbels are you talking about? Because you literally just accused of the very thing that women have been doing this whole time. The amount of women I've seen comment on the male loneliness epidemic by saying that men just need to read the fantasy books that y'all read is ridiculous. Like seriously, you get most of your relationship advice from fantasy books. That or you listen to dating advice from Cardi B, Taylor Swift, and Billie Eilish. Have y'all considered reading nonfiction for once? Learn something that'll actually improve your life and your communication skills instead of lecturing men because that's what we choose to read.
They want you for your body, but never have any intention of actually getting to know it or respecting.
I'm putting the book down. I am saying this as somebody who's open to people expressing themselves sexually however they see fit, so long as they are a consenting adult. Y'all complain all the live long day about being stigmatized for your past, your body count, doing OnlyFans and whatnot. But the second a man wants to get laid, you want to treat him and stereotype him like he's a predator. And then you have the audacity to complain like men don't deal with anything similar to slut shaming when we quite literally do. You just did it. If the men around you only want you for one thing, the question is, 1, what else are you providing? And 2, what kind of men are you dating? There are Christian guys out there who are completely abstinent because they want somebody with purity and who saves themselves. But you won't date those guys because they're misogynistic and patriarchal. And dare I say they have certain expectations that you yourself aren't willing to live with, even though you still hold men to their traditional standard, like providing, paying on the date, and a bunch of other stuff. Seriously, is there anything you're bringing to the table that a whore wouldn't?
Or when they want you for your emotional intelligence, even though they have no intention of ever reciprocating it.
Once again, Joseph Goebbels is accusing everybody of the very behavior they are guilty of. Why is it that y'all spend so much time asking men to open up, but the second they do, you just smart mouth them and tell them to go to therapy so you don't have to hear it? I've been telling men for years to open up and be more emotional and be more vulnerable, but you shut them down every time they try to do that. But we're the ones who struggle with empathy and extending the emotions. In reality, it's y'all who are constantly trauma dumping on men and expecting us to carry the burden of your emotional baggage. But the second we want you to reciprocate, you bring up the go to therapy line, not because you care, but to invalidate us and be a smartass.
Or when they want you for what you can do for them, but they don't want you for who you are.
Oh please, tell me what y'all do for men in this day and age. Y'all have made it very clear you don't want to cook for us, you don't want to clean for us because we're grown men and we should know how to do these things. All well and good. But again, y'all still expect us to provide, pay your bills, pay your rent, take care of you, pay for the dates, dote you with gifts. Y'all have completely abandoned your traditional gender role, but you still expect us to live up to ours. And the second a man expects you to go 50-50, you start bringing up all these horse crap arguments about, oh, it's dangerous for us to date men. No, it's not. Pick better men. The wide majority of men are not violent criminals. The whole idea that you're in danger by dating men is absolutely ridiculous. Oh, but we do hair and makeup. Yeah, you do it for yourself. You remind us that every time a guy you don't like hits on you. You don't get to say that we don't dress for the male gaze, we don't do makeup for the male gaze, and then try to use it as an excuse to gaslight us into paying for everything. Pick a lane and stick to it. It's one or the other.
Want you for who you are. That's loneliness.
Y'all don't even value men to begin with. To y'all, a man is only as good as the assets you can get from him. Y'all are all over the internet mocking men for their hobbies and interests. Y'all will sit here acting like you're such a great intellectual because you're into reading, and yet 90% of what you're reading is fantasy and smut. And this is coming from somebody who works as a bouncer at a strip club. I'm not judging you for it. But to sit here on the internet and judge men for consuming adult entertainment when you're no better is hypocritical. Y'all are all over the internet dogging on men who read non-fiction books with practical information when you're taking information from a fantasy novel and applying it to the real world, as if that's the way the world actually works. You want to learn how the world actually works, you read non-fictional books, not fantasy, not romance. And in the rare case y'all do read nonfiction books, you read nonfiction books with dated information that has been debunked countless times.
Crying yourself to sleep every night next to a partner who claims to love you even though his actions never follow his words, that's lonely.
Y'all do that infinitely more than men do. Y'all initiate the wide majority of breakups, and y'all commit the majority of non-reciprocal abuse. Non-reciprocal abuse being when it's one-sided. Which, by the way, means that the majority of the domestic violence crime statistics we have are actually based on mutually abusive relationships, meaning both parties are abusing each other. And given that police rarely take a man's side in this type of situation, that could also imply that a lot of these men who are abusers are actually victims who were arrested for defending themselves against their girlfriend's abuse. Don't take my word for it. Look at the CDC. Look at the domestic violence hotline. And we haven't even touched on psychological abuse, which women are certainly beating men by in a landslide. It's not even close. I mean, for years, y'all have been telling men to go to therapy and work on themselves, and yet it's becoming more and more clear the more men go to therapy that y'all only went to therapy to use what you learned to manipulate others. And when we start setting boundaries and using healthy coping mechanisms, you call it therapy speak. You know, it's starting to sound like a lot of projections going on there, Kuyan.
Opening yourself up to men because we live in a world where SA, domestic violence, and femicide is so normalized, that's loneliness.
Prove that it's normalized. I'll wait. You can't prove it because it's a load of crap and you know it. There are 19 million convicted felons in the United States of America. Not all of them are men, and the majority of them aren't actually violent criminals. But you know what? I'll throw you a bone and only cut that number down by 25%. That leaves about 13 million male violent criminals. There's still 166 million men in the US overall. That's less than 5% of the overall male population, and most violent criminals are committing crimes against other men. The odds of women being caught up in some kind of violent crime are slim to none by comparison. And even in those situations, not even other violent criminals tolerate men who harm women and children. Again, even in the criminal lifestyle, harming women and children is incredibly frowned upon. One of the biggest creators on this app, JD DeLay, is constantly talking about how bad it is to go to prison with a charge like that on your record. Even among other criminals, crimes against women is far from normalized. Quit making shit up with no evidence to support it.
The difference is that the male loneliness epidemic is self-inflicted and the female loneliness epidemic is self-preservation.
No, you just completely lack personal accountability. How much of a narcissistic brat do you have to be to honestly sit here with the most obnoxious confidence and say with your full chest, men's loneliness epidemic exists because men are shit, and women's loneliness epidemic also exists because men are shit? Do you think your own shit doesn't stink? Do you think y'all are never the bad person? We live in a society where even when women commit the same crime as men, they aren't charged for it. Yeah, remember what I said about violent criminals? Yeah, the majority of violent criminals in the US are black and Latino. Oh, and if your rebuttal to this is start talking about systemic racism, congratulations! You know how systemic bias works. See, you'll talk about white male privilege, but it's really white women who have the most privilege when it comes to the criminal justice system. It is white women who are constantly getting a reduced sentence for the same crimes as their male counterparts. Again, women commit the wide majority of non-reciprocal domestic violence in the US. This is going based on the CDC and the domestic violence hotline. But when we look at criminal justice statistics, men are getting convicted the most because only men are held accountable when they do this stuff. And if we go back to the CDC and the domestic violence hotline, lesbians have the highest rate of domestic violence overall. And trust me, as a bouncer at a strip club, women are just as much of a threat, if not more so, to each other than men are. And we never talk about it. But again, lesbians have the highest rate of domestic violence and the highest rate of divorce. At a certain point, y'all need to get your mouth off the pity dick and take some personal responsibility because y'all are part of the problem. I'm not saying it's all women until it's no men, but y'all are sitting here saying it's all men till it's no men because plain and simple, y'all just hate men as much as y'all hate personal responsibility. But by all means, continue to point fingers and avoid responsibility. Because here's the thing, if men seriously want intimacy enough, strippers are an option. What do we need you for that we couldn't get from a whore?